Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In my last video, I went through the 6 primary pitch types in baseball and discussed the purposes and objectives of each of those pitch types. In this video, we're going to dive into more detail about fastballs, what the purpose is, how you should hold it, and a couple common problems that you will encounter in trying to throw a better fastball. So let's get started. What is the fastball? It is generally the hardest pitch in a pitcher's repertoire, and it is also generally the most natural throw for any player. When you're a kid and you're just getting going, you grab a baseball, you grab any object and you throw it, you're basically already throwing a fastball. It's the most fluid, natural movement that we have in baseball for an unnatural skill as it already is. The fastball is typically your hardest velocity offering, and what this does is it reduces the amount of time that the batter has to make a decision on whether or not to swing. This is an important aspect of the pitch, and it's critical for enhancing the other pitch types in your pitch mix. As one of my old coaches used to say, the game of baseball is predicated on the fastball. And what he means is the fastball is the primary offering in the game, and it sets up every other pitch that the pitcher will throw. Without a fastball, it is very hard to be a successful pitcher. There are exceptions to the rule, but on the whole, the fastball is an incredibly important pitch. What are some other purposes of throwing a fastball? Well, it's stealing a strike. You want to just throw a pitch in the zone, you can get it in there a lot more easily than you can with other pitches that are moving differently. Again, because the fastball is often the most natural throwing motion and most natural pitch for every player. You can also generate swings and misses, so putting guys away and getting strikeouts late in an at-bat. That's another advantageous use of the fastball. And you can also generate soft contact, where they put the ball in play, but you're either getting a pop-up or a soft ground ball. You're looking for something where you can get an out. The last, of course, is just setting up an off-speed pitch, which we mentioned this earlier. It enhances those off-speed pitches, and setting up an off-speed pitch with a fastball really has to do with disrupting the hitter's timing. So let's get into some grips here. And how do you hold a fastball? Well, you take your baseball, and there's a couple different types of fastballs, but we're going to talk about the four-seam fastball in this video. A four-seam fastball means that we have these seams in a line with the spin. So if you look at the side of a baseball, I have a seam running down here, I have a seam here, a seam here, and another one on this side. So as this ball, if I'm going to turn it again, as this ball is rotating through the air, those four seams are matching up and moving in a similar way, okay? So that's how we end up with the term of a four-seam fastball. What you do with the grip is we're going to go with the horseshoe part of the baseball. So this smooth part of the baseball, and we can see this horseshoe facing either direction. This is a personal preference. And with our throwing hand, we're going to take our fingers, our index and our middle fingers, and place them on the seam. So this is an important aspect here, where the seam itself is nested right in between these two digits of your finger. We don't have the seam on our fingertips on the seam, and we're not all the way past it where the seam is tucked in back too far. But instead, the little nook and cranny in between the two digits, if you have the seam resting right in there so that you get a little bit of friction, but you're not all the way out on the fingertips, you're in the right spot. So again, we're looking at this. I have the horseshoe. I'm going across that horseshoe with my fingers right on those seams, so I have a friction source for me to pull down on. What about the thumb? The thumb is one of the most varied digits on a fastball grip amongst players, and the hand size plays into this for where it should go. Generally, smaller hands, the thumb is going to be more on the side of the baseball. It should generally be underneath, but the smaller hands are going to be more comfortable more on the side. But as you get larger hands and you get more comfortable with this, the thumb gradually moves underneath the baseball. Some guys go so far as to fully tuck it. This one is difficult unless your hands are really large, but you tuck the thumb down underneath the baseball. And what this does is it gives you even more leverage and more pressure on the fingers, and it takes away some of the pressure elsewhere on the baseball. The most common, though, is to just have the thumb directly underneath the baseball. So what we have here is a tripod effect where we have our index, our middle finger, and our thumb, and you can see it's almost like it's forming a tripod. The spacing in between your index and middle fingers, a good rule of thumb is take your index finger on your opposite hand and put it in between your two fingers, and that's the correct distance that you should have in your grip. If you go wider than that, you might be losing out on some velocity. If you go narrower than that, where you can't fit your finger in between, it's going to be a lot harder for you to control the ball. So the general solution is to have 1 finger's width of separation between the two fingers. And again, going back to this tripod analogy, we have a very stable grip on the baseball. It's centered. There's not more of the baseball on one side or the other of the thumb, but we're split down evenly. And then with this tripod action, we have a balancing act, so it's a very stable and firm grip. What about pressure? That's a very common question on how tightly should you be holding the ball. Well, it should be firm, okay? The ball should not drop out of your hand if you're holding it like this. It should be in there resting snugly. Now, what you don't want to see is your forearm under intense pressure and veins bulging because you're trying to get such a strong grip on the ball. That's not effective either. That can lead to other issues, inconsistency, potential health issues by putting way too much strain on your arm. So what we're looking for is the happy medium between the two. We don't want to be overly soft and we don't want to be overly tight. Instead, what I would recommend is if you can take your thumb off the baseball, if your hand is large enough for this, you should be able to hold the baseball in your hand without the thumb. Then you add the thumb and add a little bit of pressure to it right underneath and you're set. Now you have a good amount of tension on the baseball without putting stress on your arm. So what are some common issues that we see with fastballs as players are trying to improve their fastball, make it better, and really have a good quality pitch? Well, the most common one that comes up is not enough velocity. Players want to throw it harder. And again, the velocity is a very important aspect of the pitch, so seeking more velocity makes a lot of sense and it is good to pursue. What we would look for in adding velocity on a fastball is a lot of strength training. Now that's a whole nother topic that we can get really in depth on, and hopefully we'll do a video in the future covering some examples and some specifics on the training regimen that we can follow. But in order to throw harder, you need to develop the body and the muscles so that they can have the strength to move the baseball, because it is heavy and we're working with levers. And so you increase the torque when the ball's away from your elbow and shoulder and all of these different axes. So you need to have strength and stability, but you also need explosiveness. And the best way of doing that is in training in the weight room, and also making sure that you're incorporating the proper calisthenics and arm care routines, which we will cover arm care in a future video as well. The only way that you're going to throw hard is to throw hard. So what do I mean by that? I mean that it takes reps, and the body is adaptable and it will respond to the input that it receives. So if you're trying to throw harder, but you're only practicing at say 70%, 80, 85% of your maximum intensity, your body is not getting pushed to try to exceed its current maximum. Now, you don't need to go out and try and throw every ball as hard as you can all the time, but make sure that in your throwing program, when you play catch or when you're long tossing, just having a good time, whatever it might be, have some throws where you're going at 100% intensity after you've warmed up to make sure that your body is capable of going through it. But have some full intensity throws where you're really trying to let it eat and let it go. And when you are going through that process of straining the body, of getting it used to being at that 100% and trying to go just that little bit more, then your body will be able to adapt, and it should add velocity over time. When you incorporate the strength training, the arm care routines, and some other features along with it, you're in a good place and you have a quality program for adding some velocity. Problem number 2, my fastball doesn't have enough life. So when we talk about life on a fastball, we're generally referring to movement on a pitch. In the movement, it comes from the spin. So the faster we can spin the baseball, the more movement potential the pitch has. The spin efficiency, so the direction of the spin, has a large impact on that as well. And when somebody says they don't have enough life on their fastball, it typically means that the movement is not matching up with what their expectations are for the pitch. And fastballs, when we throw them, they have a large backspin component to them. And what we want to see on good quality fastballs that have great life, great zip, great hop, great ride through the zone, they have high spin efficiency and they have a lot of backspin to them. So a lot of pitchers, when they come and they throw the fastball just naturally, their hand ends up a little bit around the baseball and it comes out of their hand and it's spinning like this. They might still have a lot of backspin, but you can see there's also some gyro spin to it. The Magnus effect is what creates movement, is the primary driver of movement for a pitch. And the Magnus effect comes into play when this direction of the spin, when the axis is perpendicular to the direction of the velocity of the baseball. So what I'm saying is, instead of being around the ball so that it's spinning with a little bit of parallel spin as well, what you need to work on is having more perpendicular spin towards the plate. So there's a number of different ways that you can do this, but primarily by having this in your mind and having it be a goal of having this spin stay clean and stay perpendicular to the plate, you will make progress in this. Number 3, I don't have enough control of the fastball. So when we talked earlier about the purposes of the pitch, one of them is stealing a strike. It's the easiest pitch to locate. Some people, really, most people, still have difficulty locating the fastball, especially when they're trying to throw it nearly 100% effort, trying to max out their velocities. So what can we do to help improve the control of the fastball? Variability training. That's one of my favorite ways to work on things, and in particular, it's one of the most effective for improving command. When I say variability training, you can do this a couple of different ways. You can set up different targets. Say you were throwing into a fence, okay? You can have a target up here, another one over here. You can set up targets down low and set up one in the middle, almost like a 5-point grid. When you're throwing, you grab a bucket of baseballs and you alternate between these points and you challenge yourself to hit these different targets and move them around throughout your normal throwing program. So you're varying the target and your intent. Instead, most players, when they play catch, they either don't have a target at all and they're not focused on it, or they just try and hit the general upper body of their catch partner. That's okay at times, but having an intended target can make a huge difference in your ability to put the fastball where you want it to go in a game. The other component of variability training is switching up the baseball itself. So you can switch to a softball or a football. You can grab a 6-ounce baseball instead of a 5-ounce baseball. You can grab a 4-ounce baseball. They sell those online as well. But really what you're looking for is different sizes, different weights, different surfaces, so the feeling will be different in your hand. And when you're playing catch, just switch between those balls. And it's going to be really weird. It's going to be uncomfortable. No matter how many times you do it, it's uncomfortable. But what you're doing is you're training your body to have motor control and to really be able to feel what's happening as the object is leaving your hand. So as you're developing that skill through different tools, then when you go back to the baseball, your body will have an improved ability to make micro adjustments during the release of the throw when your hand is moving at its fastest. It's a great tool. It's one of my favorites. And you can also have a lot of fun doing variability training, and you can make it into competitions if you're with a group of players or say a team, but you can also do it on your own and have a great intent. So there you have it. Those are the basics of the fastball, the purpose of the pitch, how you should grip it, and some common problems or areas of improvement that we encounter often in baseball. I hope this video has helped you learn something today, and stay tuned for my next video as I continue to go through different pitch types in more detail. Thanks for watching.